Welcome to another episode of That Grief Relief podcast. I'm Katie, and today it's another in-person recording, which I get very excited about, but we are socially distanced.
Of course.
Thank you very much for having a massive sofa. Me. Thank you very much. Today's guest is, I'm going to get it right, Nadim Safieddine.
Perfect.
That's quite good,
that
wasn't
was
it?
awesome. Great. Well done. Yeah.
You're welcome, Lebanon. You're welcome. Nadim, thanks so much for coming to my house.
Thank you so much for having me.
And on a Saturday morning as well.
Yeah.
Although you didn't bring me anything from Costa.
No. Oh, oops.
So-
yeah, should have. Funny enough, and I was just at Starbucks. Yeah, so.
Oh no, please don't. I mean, I'm not sponsored by Costa. I'd love to be, but I'm a big Costa fan.
Okay, noted.
Okay,
For
so
next
I'm
time,
pleased. Although, if you'd have turned up with Starbucks, would I have turned you away? No.
You would have had to be polite about
Yeah.
it. Thank you so much. Then drop it in the trash.
Oh God, thanks so much for coming. Nadim and I, we were connected via mutual connections, as is always the case on LinkedIn, because you seem to write, blog, if you like, about grief a lot. And I read a number of your articles, but I tried not to read too much detail because I don't want to know
You didn't want any
the
spoilers.
story. Yeah, no spoiler alerts.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But I love the way that you're so open about talking about grief. So I guess, first of all, tell us why you write about grief. It's born from your own experiences with regards to your parents. So tell us their stories.
So I lost both my parents to cancer, actually. So my dad when I was 18 and my mom when I was 23.
Oh my gosh.
So it's been pretty therapeutic to write about it. I think that's the way that I processed my grief. And the more I write about it, the more I realize that people love reading about grief because they're feeling so alone in their own pain and they want someone maybe verbalizing it or writing it down. So I get so many messages from people I've never met, and that feels amazing, honestly. Not just friends telling me, oh, I like this article, but someone I've never met telling me, wow, this, I could relate to this, for example. And I've also lost both my parents. And I feel such a bond. I don't know if you feel that
Same.
as well.
Yeah.
When I meet someone or get in touch with someone who's lost both parents, it just feels like... it still feels rare to me, although there's so many of us all over the world.
Yeah. Do you ever call yourself an orphan?
Not really.
No, someone referred to me as an orphan
Yeah,
once.
me too, as well. It's so foreign and strange to me.
Really strange, because you hear orphan and you think Annie or
Exactly,
Oliver or Oliver Twist, something like that.
Yeah,
Not
that's
Oliver as
always
in my
felt-
brother. He is an orphan.
He
Oh,
lives
shame.
on-
Oh, I didn't put those two together. Okay, so the whole orphan thing is strange, but it is a weird bond, isn't it? But then you almost don't want to, sorry to interrupt you don't want to overstep a boundary. It's not when you meet someone that's lost their parents, you don't want to be like, oh, me too, like, let's be friends. But you almost want to, I don't know if you feel the same, but almost reassure them that I'm here if you need to talk about anything.
Especially if they lost them recently, perhaps. I kind of want to let them know it'll be okay, and I'm fine, as Ross says on Friends. I could tell you're a Friends fan because I saw your welcome mat.
And please don't, because one of your first articles we were introduced to, you used the image of Joey with the dog, and he made the dog sad.
Yes.
And I thought, Nadim and I are going to be best friends.
So especially when someone has recently gone through a loss, I kind of feel like I want to comfort them and show them that things will be okay in a way. But yeah, for me, going back to your question, writing is the way I think I processed grief the most.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more, not in detail so much, but about, when your dad died first,
course,
when you were 18, and how that affected your mum and your family?
Of course, yeah. So my dad got diagnosed with, and this is super strange, I don't remember which cancer. And my brother and I were recently discussing this because I thought it was pancreatic.
Okay.
It's kind of a blur now, like you don't really remember, which is so weird. My brother insists it was kidney cancer. I don't know which one it was, but it was around...
And forgive me, sorry, when you were 18, I don't know how old you are now. So how long ago was this? Right, okay, fine.
So I was 17 when he was diagnosed, I think, with one of these cancers. They're all horrible. And he lasted a year, I think. He did chemo. I think there was surgery at some point. But it was basically a year and he was gone.
Wow.
So I was 18 when he died. So that was, of course, super tough on us, on my mom, having to raise. So it was just me and my brother.
Okay.
My brother's 9 years older. So we weren't kids. I was 18, he was 27. But it was still super tough on her and all of us.
Yeah.
Of course. 3 years later, my mom was diagnosed. So it felt like we were still kind of grieving.
Yeah.
And I think that was the hardest part, accepting that it was happening again. Because in my mind, I don't know about your parents. Were they? I actually don't know how they passed away.
Yeah, my mum was a heart attack and my dad was cancer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were two separate things.
Yeah, very.
But coming to terms with the fact that both got cancer was super tough. I still don't believe it sometimes. Like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
That's why I used to go online a lot to like different message boards just to find other people. And it's super common, by the way. There's so many in the world. I just didn't know anyone in my immediate circle.
How funny.
And they were unrelated moms. So, 3 years after he passed away, my mom was diagnosed with peritoneal cancer, which is super rare. It's kind of like ovarian.
Okay.
It's very close to ovarian cancer,
Uh-huh.
which is super rare and very fatal. But she lasted 3 years. She did chemo for 3 years.
Gosh, that's a long old slog for chemo, though, isn't
so
it?
sometimes I think
How did she find out? Sorry, how did she?
Yeah. That's a good story. Just to add some lightheartedness.
I like the way you start laughing about it. This is a great story.
You're gonna love this. No, because my dad, I don't remember how he found out.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't remember. I remember mom more because it was more fresh, probably. Mom, she started having like a kind of a pregnant mini belly. It was super weird. And she did so many tests and no doctor would figure it out. She did every test in the world. It's something called ascites. It's a fluid in the body that fills up or so. So she had like a mini pregnant belly and no one could understand why. So it was like a month of us being terrified and not knowing what it was until they figured out it was cancer. So it was a super weird symptom. So yeah, when she found out, she started, I think there was a surgery and then she did chemo over the course of 3 years. But I often wonder, like, do I prefer dad's experience, which was quick, or mom's, which was you watch the person wither away, so which is super traumatic as well.
Yeah.
So what's worse, But also you see what they're made of and how strong they are, and you get more time with them. So both have positives and negatives.
No, it's so true. And I've asked the question a few times on some of the episodes because my mum was a heart attack. Literally didn't
Suddenly.
know anything.
No pain whatsoever.
Absolutely nothing.
That's the best
as
thing
far as we know.
That's the best thing you would wish for someone you love, that they feel no pain.
But then, I know this is going to sound silly, but then the admin side of things was just a nightmare. Trying, because obviously she didn't know she was going to die.
Right.
Luckily, she had a lot of paperwork in place. Happy days. Whereas with my dad, we sat around the table and he planned his own funeral. He told us what food was going to be there, what music and what not music. And
exactly.
Actually, it was mostly what not was going to be there.
So what cancer did your dad have?
Good question. So he had brain tumors, but brain cancer is always secondary. It's never the first one. Okay. So they searched quite a while to find the primary cancer. And again, same as you, and I don't know if my brother
actually,
Russell,
we were not sure where it started. I think it had already spread by the time. That's why we're not sure. It was in his lungs by then.
Exactly. And then I think, and again, I asked Russell this the other day. I think they eventually wrote down stomach cancer that killed him. They also spelt the name of our house wrong on his death certificate, and my dad would go mad. So let's not talk about that.
Let's not.
So with regards, going back to your dad then, so your dad was kind of a short and sweet
1
battle.
year. My mom for like 3 years. She lost her hair, which was super sad. Lots of nausea that comes and goes. All the side effects. And I'd go with her weekly to chemo, and it was my life for a long time.
Yeah, I bet.
And then she passed away. And so my dad passed away in 2006, and my mom 6 years later in 2012. So almost 10 years next year, which is crazy to me. Time flies and it's insane, and it still feels like yesterday sometimes. But mom's was definitely more traumatic, maybe because also I was much closer to her. My brother was much closer to my dad. I was much closer to my mom. So
because I was gonna say, when your dad passed away, then how did that? This was back in Beirut.
Beirut, both in Beirut.
how did that affect the family first and foremost with the loss of,
so
I guess, ultimately the head of the family?
Exactly. So he passed away on my first day of uni. I remember this very well. So I missed that, which felt super. I went a few days later and it felt very off balance because all my friends had experienced university together their first time, and I was a few days late. My mother and brother, because he was 9 years older, they basically took over everything and coddled me, and maybe coddled me too much in retrospect. In therapy, I've learned, we can talk a lot about therapy and grief now. But through therapy, I've realized that especially my brother, because then after my mom passed away, my brother did everything. He took care of me so much that I moved to Dubai 2 years ago with my fiance, who's now my wife. And I didn't know how to be an adult.
Of course.
It's super interesting because he literally paid all the bills, never made me worry about anything, which is amazing. But I came here and it felt like I was a kid trying to be an adult. And
your wife still married you?
Yes.
Wow, interesting. What a brave woman she is.
For 2 years now. It's not that bad, but still
I know what you mean.
Like, yeah.
But have you spoken to your brother about that? Oh, interesting.
And my brother and I were super close because we're the only two who've been through this and lost both our parents. So we have talks all the time, heart to heart. He was actually here this week.
No, right.
And we're always deep diving into all these topics about how our parents raised us, about how we're dealing with grief. So we discussed this, and I told him that I'm super thankful how much you cared for me. But the negative side of it, but I don't blame you because I would have done the same. I don't want him to feel bad. So don't feel bad, bro, if you're watching this. But the negative side is that I didn't... my adulthood was kind of, I don't know, delayed in a way. I don't know what... It's just little stuff, like admin stuff, like paying bills and managing finances and stuff like that.
Adulting. Yeah.
So I just had to basically learn how to do this stuff when I moved to Dubai, which is super funny. But we're super close and we process grief very differently. I'm super emotional like my mom.
Okay.
He's super closed off like my dad.
Okay.
We both do therapy, which helps us a lot.
Yeah.
And I recommend, for everyone, whether you've gone through grief or not, I'm always telling people that therapy is the best thing you can do. Even when you're feeling great, it helps.
Therapy is brill.
Just like you work out your physical body, you should take care of your mental health as well. To answer your question, I did talk to my brother about this, and but I'm super thankful because he was my parent basically after both my parents after they passed away, and it was hard leaving Lebanon and coming here without him. Actually, that's been really tough.
Yeah. What brought you to Dubai then?
Work.
Oh, okay, fine.
Lebanon isn't doing so well, and both my wife and I found work and moved here.
Okay.
And
just before a really tough time.
Yeah, actually we're very lucky. We moved here a few months before rock bottom in Lebanon, so we're super lucky. And so being without my brother, who was basically my parent, was super tough.
Yeah.
But I'm doing it. Life goes on, and you adapt,
absolutely. With regards to you say that you were closer to your mum than your dad. Not that means that you weren't close to your dad at all.
Yeah.
So are you able to, and I'm sure you are able to vocalize because you write about it, how you grieved them differently?
Yeah.
Was there quite some standout differences?
So when my dad passed away, grieving was mostly not thinking about it, I think, and just compartmentalizing it, or just not really dealing with it or thinking about it much. But with my mom, there was a lot. That's when I started. Okay, so it's very interesting. So when my mom passed away, I started channeling my grief into being very productive. Like I started a website where I review movies and series and stuff. So I'm a big fan of movies and series. So to distract myself, I would write about my passion, not about grief. Grief is a new thing. I've been writing about it the last few years.
Okay.
Grieving through my mom's death, I got into fitness. I was never into fitness in my life. The gym was a savior for me. I even became a fitness instructor. So on the side, I teach fitness classes.
No way.
So that's become a huge passion of mine. So...
What is that?
Is she into fitness?
She's into annoying me. Apologies.
So... I'm trying to remember, how did I grieve my dad? I didn't really talk about it much. I was too preoccupied with university.
Okay,
It let me basically forget about it. I had moments where I cried and stuff like that, but with my mom, it was much more intense. And I started therapy after my mom.
Okay.
I think it was the cumulative effect of both deaths.
Yeah.
I needed therapy.
Yeah.
Someone professional to talk to help me deal
And did
with
you
it.
decide that yourself, or did someone suggest it?
Good question. I think my aunt recommended once, why don't you see someone? And I had to go through like 3-4, because you have to find the right therapist.
I'm so pleased you said that.
Yeah. So many people try one therapist and say it's not for me. No, you have to find someone you click with, who understands you, who gets you, who knows how to help you. So I went through like 3-4 therapists to find a great one in Lebanon.
And tell me a bit more about that. Like, why didn't you gel with the first even 1, 2, 3?
So I'm someone who needs their therapist to give them very practical tips on techniques that you can do. For example, the therapist I have here, who's fantastic, she's very much into meditation and Headspace and stuff like that. I don't know if you know the app Headspace. I love it. It's all about meditation. So I like when they give me practical tips of stuff I can do. So that's something that's super helpful. And just diving deep into my childhood, my parents and how they raised us, which is something I discuss with my brother a lot. Actually, my brother and I discovered a few days ago that the relationship between my mom and dad is now my brother has been projected into my brother and I.
No way.
So it's just stuff like this that you learn through therapy and through talking and through discussing your grief and your anxieties. What else? So you're asking me about the therapists.
Yeah, just saying about it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting that you went into therapy. I guess at technically a quite young age, but you'd already experienced 2, life-changing traumas.
I think it was at 21 I started 22. Sorry, when my mom passed away, so 23. That's when I started therapy, and I haven't stopped since. I'd stopped for a few months, but then I'd realized that no, I this is a constant I always want in my life, and it would be so beneficial to anyone, to everyone, whether you're doing good or bad. It helps you focus and stay healthy and know how to, control your mind. And what's helped me a lot is awareness and meditation. Those have helped me so much. And I read the book that changed my life called Untethered Soul.
Okay.
And it's this is the one book I actually gift to people, because it's all about controlling your thoughts, being aware of your feelings, being aware that, okay, now I'm sad because I'm grieving. Let it pass. Don't resist it. Like so many things like that have helped me so much. I've grown so much over the last few years, thanks to the grief.
How interesting. I mean, it's quite it can be such a journey, can't it? And that even sounds a little bit sort of niche, and I think like a very popular buzzword at the moment, isn't it? About the whole journey thing. It's interesting that you mentioned meditation. So many people talk about meditation, talk about journaling, manifesting. Gorgeous Diana, who had on the podcast, she joked about all her post-it notes around her I can't speak. Post-it notes around her mirror. No one puts post-it notes on a window, do they? I mean, that would be weird.
So what does she put on these post-it notes?
Just like her daily kind
affirmations.
of affirmations, look after your soul and feed your body, drink water and things like that. And they're always there.
Have you heard of something called morning pages?
No.
Which is, you wake up every day. I did it for a while and it was so helpful. I recommend it to so many people. You wake up and for 30 minutes, you put a timer on your phone. You write down everything on your mind by hand. It has to be by hand, not typing. And verbalizing everything or writing it down removes all your anxieties, your sadness, your emotions. At some point, you could be writing, I have no idea what to write about. I'm so sick of this. This is so boring. But eventually, you start going into tangents and you basically blurt everything out of your mind onto the paper so you feel clear for the rest of the day. And I think it's super helpful. I advised a friend who recently lost someone in their family to do this, and she told me it helped so much through the grieving process. She did every single morning.
Really?
Yeah. So it's called Morning Pages. It's super therapeutic.
Because I journaled when I went through some stuff last year, nothing to do with my parents, but I had a journal app. And actually, and I say this quite a lot, my brother Russell was like, why don't you write it down? Why does it have to be on your phone? I love my phone. My phone is glued to my hand. So it's kind of there. Yeah. And I found that very... Sometimes it would be, sometimes you write an email or a WhatsApp, and I was in that kind of mode, and that was okay. I do have
Were you doing it daily?
Yeah. I do have a book of gratitude
that's
by
nice.
my bed that my friend Giselle bought me, and she just said just one thing. If it's just one thing a day, just write it down. What have you been grateful for the day?
I've recently gotten into writing down things I'm grateful for on a daily basis. When I remember, it helps so much.
Yeah,
honestly, it's really helpful.
And it's not this whole hashtag blessed kind of thing. I talk about this a lot on the podcast as well. Like, I genuinely get so passionate about my friends and my family and the love that I feel for people. And I'm very grateful. And it was actually, I was speaking about the podcast episode that came out last week. So grateful to speak to people because his story was very similar to my dad's. And just listening to him, I was like beaming, smiling, going, oh, wow, it's amazing. And having that gratitude apart from just, like, I'm so grateful to live in Dubai. And
Speaking of friends helped me a lot through the grieving process. Like I remember when my mom was in the hospital those 3 years, my friends were always there. We'd go out into the waiting room. There'd always be 3-4 of them there for me, which was so comforting and so helpful. Just a break, a distraction from the chemo and the IVs and the medicines and all of that. So friends really became family. I'm so close to my friends now, and a lot of them are in Dubai, which is amazing.
Nice.
That was one of the big pluses for me to move here. Just staying in touch with your friends and not detaching if you can, and not going into your own little corner.
And finding those friends that are your absolute safe space,
yes,
I think are important. Those friends that will accept you at your lowest and your worst. I'm not a hugger. I don't like to be hugged and kind of consoled that way. But literally, many a time on the corner of this sofa, Nadim, I'll tell you, I've sobbed and my friends just sit there. Yeah. And actually, shout out to my sister-in-law, Stacey, from episode 4. She'll be like, you don't want a hug? And my brother's like, no, just leave her. She's fine.
Just being there is enough.
Yeah,
right?
That's all I want is for them to be there. And so friends are so important. What about other family members then? You mentioned your aunt, but what about like your mum and dad?
My aunt is basically like my mom.
Okay.
She was my mom's only sibling, her sister. And she really took care of us. And we were always super close, so that helped a lot. We're a very small family. We're like 10 people. So, of course, became even closer to our tight-knit family, which helped a lot. Yeah. Family and friends really helped me through it. Fitness helped me through it. Writing helped me through it. So I talked to my friends a lot about grief, and not all of them know what to say. No. And how to react. But for me, I guess it's just being giving me that. Just listening is enough. Yeah. And even when my mom was in the hospital, I would message or WhatsApp friends, and they would be really supportive and comforting. I actually remember I used to do this, and it's super funny. I would write down what I was feeling and copy paste it to a bunch of different friends, just to get as much love and support as possible from different people. I'm not gonna write the same thing I'm sad to like everyone, so I just copy paste it. And they're gonna laugh now if they're watching this, but I appreciated every one of their responses. Like each one of them helped me.
They're going to be going through their WhatsApps now going, Nadim, you absolute, I thought that was a genuine heartfelt message to me. Like,
of course, the responses were genuine later, but just to instigate the conversation, there would always be, or like an update, like, oh, mom's surgery didn't go well, or something like that.
Yeah, of course.
But I always felt like I needed all my friends to know so that they would all support me. Like maybe it was selfish, but at the time I needed that.
I don't think it's selfish at all. And
I needed to update them all the time. I didn't want to be alone in it.
No.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And that's such a key word, because we've spoken a lot about being alone, and it's letting people know that they're not alone in their grief, even if they want to be alone. That's fine. Of course, alone time is good. There's been a lot of conversations about the difference between keeping yourself busy, i.e. you're at university. Is that a good thing? Should you have forced yourself to grieve, and then it's backwards and forwards. And it goes back to, I know that it's the main article that we were connected over, and what I say at the beginning of every podcast is that we all grieve differently. There's no right or wrong way.
Definitely.
You can't force yourself to do anything. And yes, if things do come to a head and to a forefront, I believe, same as you, I'm an advocate for therapy. So it's like, that's when you speak to someone or your outlet. So your grief relief, then, it was this kind of writing, then just pen to paper.
Writing and fitness, for sure.
Really?
Because so becoming an instructor, so there are these classes. So body pump and body combat, you know them so well. Being on stage, great, so you know that. Because it's all about music and stuff. So expressing yourself on stage, that was an insane outlet for me. It brought me so much joy, and I'm very sad that my parents never saw me on stage.
Oh, no
I think
way.
about that sometimes.
Yeah.
I wasn't even into fitness when they were around, and my mom always nagged about me doing fitness, and I was never into it. So that's a bit sad.
Okay.
But being on stage totally transformed me, gave me an outlet. It gave me kind of a purpose to bring joy to people, because I often think, who of these people in my class have someone who is sick, who might have cancer, who just went through a death and they're not talking about it? Like I have 30 people in every class. Surely one of them is going through something horrible and traumatic, or just lost someone. If I can give them this joy in 1 hour, because that hour was my escape when I was going through horrible times, like this might be my purpose more than anything else.
Okay.
So I get the joy from classes and from writing. I feel like I'm helping people go through this.
And Les Mills instructors, you can feel the difference from when an instructor loves their class.
But going back to something you said about everyone grieves differently, and there's no such thing as grieving wrong. I've often felt like maybe I've grieved in the wrong way, in that, especially after my dad, I didn't... I don't know, like, I never suffered through anxiety, for example. Let's go back. After both my parents passed away, although I cried a lot and it was very sad and all of that, I kind of felt like I was fine, in a way, which was always very strange to me. Why do I feel kind of fine? But then, when I turned around 28, I'm 33 now, I started suffering from anxiety. Like, I would have a few panic attacks here and there. The heart racing, waking up with this feeling of dread, and I couldn't really explain it. So my therapist told me that a lot of it was cumulative from the deaths. Like, I was finally coming to terms with certain things, so that was very interesting. Like, grief is not a constrained thing. It is a journey, yes, and a lot of times the effects can appear in the long term. Perhaps. Maybe because I was getting married, for example. So I was going through big life changes. I was moving countries. And I needed my support system, maybe of my parents or so. So I remember my therapist told me, and this has stuck with me, getting married, changing countries, these are all positive things, but that doesn't mean they're going to make you less anxious. They don't have to be negative, traumatic events for you to feel anxious. They're still changing your comfort zone. And the big theme in my life is trying to contain the comfort zone, probably because the two deaths were the two diagnoses were such shocks to the system. I'm someone who likes their comfort zone. My friends always make fun of this.
There's nothing
but I'm
wrong
proud
with
of
the comfort
that.
zone.
I like my comfort zone because I can control it, and I feel like I know what to expect. And it definitely comes from losing two parents.
For sure.
And having to adapt and get accustomed to so much change.
As you say, be it good or bad. But you mentioned about, perhaps in hindsight, you didn't grieve in the right way initially. But again, I'm not a professional. Nadim and I aren't professionals, but it probably was the right way at the time.
Exactly.
You didn't know any different. You weren't doing any harm, as I'm assuming, to yourself or anybody else. Were there any dark times when you thought, I just don't know how I'm going to get through this?
Of course. And they're like waves of grief that come at you, I think. They'd happen a lot, like, let's say when I'm in the shower. I don't know why. Do we reflect a lot in the shower?
Always.
Yeah. Suddenly I get a wave of grief and you feel like, how will you ever get out of it? And then you just do, and I guess it's just being human. I don't know. We just adapt. But lots of dark times, especially, moving countries was tough because I felt like I didn't have perhaps a support system. And I often feel like the only person who will get me is my brother, because he's the only one in the world who's been through the exact same experience. My wife is incredible, and I've told her, like, she's never met my parents, which is super sad. I think sad of that sometimes.
Yeah, that is
how could
sad.
the person I love the most now have never met my parents?
Yeah.
This is insane. But I know they would have loved her and all of that.
Yeah.
But so it's moments like those that feel super overwhelming and suffocating. But definitely time teaches you to adapt to grief. The waves are much less than the ones you'd get in the immediate aftermath of a year or 2 years. I think the first 2 years maybe after a death were the toughest for me in both cases. I'd have more waves of grief and sobbing and all of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes now I'm triggered when I'm walking down the street and I see a kid with their parent, and I look at the kid and I hope that they never have to lose them at a young age.
Oh gosh, yeah. What an interesting thought.
Yeah, I get that a lot actually,
Really?
because I look at pictures of me when I was young with my kids, with my parents, sorry, and I say, oh, Nadim is so innocent. He had no idea he would lose them, so young.
Yeah.
You know? So now when I see kids on the street with their parents, and I wonder, like, I hope that their parents will stay with them for a while.
Yeah.
And it's super weird. I get that a lot.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that sort of triggers you with regards to, I mean, I'm guessing more about your mum. I'm sure that you're more triggered.
Hospitals. I watch Grey's Anatomy. I've been watching it for 17 years.
Okay.
It's the one thing that always makes me cry, because it's all about
episode.
Really.
Yeah.
It's all about hospitals.
Yeah.
It's the one, whenever I see cases of hospitals on movies and series and stuff, and people on their deathbeds and stuff, that's super triggering. But it's therapeutic. I cry and I feel better afterwards.
Yeah.
Because both parents, I said goodbye to them in a hospital bed.
Okay.
Which is also a gift in some twisted way, because you get to say everything and you get to bid them goodbye, which you didn't get with your mom, right? Because she had a heart attack. It was sudden.
In fact, I was in Beirut, as we were discussing earlier.
So saying goodbye is a gift, I guess, because you get to say everything, but it comes at the expense of watching them wither away, and because they become a shell of their former selves.
Yeah.
And the waves of grief that come to me now in this present day, they're super rare, but they come every once in a while when I remember both of their final month, because each of them in their final month, they suffered a lot. There were lots of, because they're on lots of drugs and they're like moaning in pain.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But
it's the truth. And sometimes it happens in your last few weeks or so. So that's very sad to think about. And that kind of brings up a lot of feelings. I just get annoyed or angry or frustrated that they went through that.
Yeah.
So that's something that still pisses me off in a way and makes me sad.
Yeah. And that's why it's then almost, as Sam mentioned in last week's episode, it's almost then like a relief when they go.
101%.
Yeah,
and that's something that you can't say much. You don't feel too comfortable saying
quite,
something.
But unless you're in company.
But I actually used to say that to my friends a lot, because I wanted them to be comfortable with it. With the fact that I felt such relief when both of them passed away, because you don't want to see the person you love most suffer. You can deal with your own pain when they're gone. So the relief, 101%, especially with cancer and chemo and all of that, because they become so thin and they're not eating, and it's just very heartbreaking. So you feel such relief. Like the tough part is watching them. Like, none of the grief I've experienced in the last 10 years or so has compared to the sadness I felt in their last weeks or month or so. That is the worst and most traumatic, for sure.
It's a and that's something that I'm very grateful for, is that my dad wasn't in any pain until probably about the last week. Okay. Because he didn't do chemo or anything.
That's relatively good.
It was too late. It was palliative care at that point. And as my dad would say, I'm a lost cause now.
So he could joke about it.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing. Humor helps a lot.
I mean, I am the product of both my mom and my dad.
Do you also make lots of morbid jokes with your friends all the time? Because I do it so much. They love my dark humor.
Yeah, all the time. And this is something we speak about a lot, because this podcast originally was just going to be me and my family and my brothers, because we, are so lighthearted about it without losing the sentiment of the fact, like, we know we've lost our mum and dad and it's awful. But this is how we sort of deal with it. But yeah, both my mum and dad's personalities were amazing, but my dad, oh my goodness, he was a nightmare. But
in what way?
Just because he would always joke. So something I've mentioned before, where we were from a small town called Battle in East Sussex, and the local GP would pop in and see my dad. And my dad was a very well-known member of the community. He was at Front Page News when he passed away. I'll have you know, the local newspaper. And the GP would pop in and go upstairs. My dad was in bed at home. And he'd be like, don't bother coming to see me. Like, you don't need to waste your time. You've got more important people to see. I'm a lost cause. And he'll be like, Steve, can you just let me come and see you? Like, I've treated you for years as just a general, although my dad never went to the doctors. He was one of those generational people. I'll be fine.
They didn't take care of themselves.
Oh, well, he did, but never went to the doctor.
Okay, yeah.
Like, once he actually cracked his head open in an accident in the garden during a storm. And didn't go. Like, we were like, Dad, there is blood pouring from your head. I'll be fine. Anyway, so so very much with humour, and yes, I make the morbid jokes, and we all do, and it shocks people at first. Then people know I'm going to say it. Then
you give them permission to laugh. They feel,
yeah, exactly. Now, talking about from a cultural perspective, if you like, because you are from Lebanon, and it's a certainly different culture than I know, and a lot of listeners don't understand.
Right,
is a number of things. So, yes, my morbid humour goes down an absolute storm with my Western audience, but sometimes with, like Middle Eastern friends, or certainly if they're Muslim, they're kind of, I can read a room. I don't like make these jokes all the time. Yeah. There's that. But then also because you're a man and you're so open with these emotions, how has that affected? Oh,
that's a great question. Especially in being so open with my emotions. I've always felt a bit of an outsider in Lebanon in that sense. And I struggled in the beginning when I wrote my first ever article about grief and death. Like, should I be doing this? Are people ready, especially in this region? But in the end, you're
you even questioned it yourself.
Yes, but I still did it. Maybe I took my brother's opinion. I can't remember now, but it's just something I felt I had to do. And when I saw the incredible response, actually the first ever article I wrote was blogging saved my life. And it was all about how reviewing movies and series gave me a purpose after my mom's death, because I was just it was just such a sad time. I used to look forward to writing about movies and series, and the article was huge, got thousands of likes and stuff. That was when there was just Facebook at the time. And I got so many messages from people I'd never met. And then I realized, there's a purpose here. I could help people who have been through something similar, who've lost someone and need to read about someone who's gone through something similar. Because like I told you, I used to go on message boards and write, I'd go on Google and write, both my parents died of cancer. I actually write those words. It was very fun. And first of all, the auto search would continue it. So you know that there are lots of people doing that search.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting.
And then I'd find a bunch of message boards with thousands of people all over the world with stories much worse than mine.
Yeah.
Like both parents at the same time with cancer. That would make me feel so much better about myself, selfishly. Imagine having both your parents going through chemo at the exact same time and dying like within a year.
Wow.
Like I had 3 years of my mom being healthy after my dad, which was great, and then 3 more years of her fighting chemo, and we still had good times. We still
sure.
So yeah, but coming from Lebanon, yes, definitely. Now the jokes thing, I could do as many as I liked because I was in an American university with very Western friends and all of that, so that was great. But I definitely probably couldn't have made such jokes if I was in a more traditional Arab university or so, possible. But I always did what was right for me and what felt appropriate for me to grieve. And I just talked a lot about my grief. I didn't keep anything in.
Good.
I was always talking.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever had that. Am I talking too much about grief? I would ask myself. He asked the one with the podcast.
That's my whole life, Nadim. Thanks so much.
Yeah, but I felt that a lot sometimes. Like, are my friends sick of me talking about? And I've said that a few times. Like, do I depress you when I talk to you too much about death and how sad I am or so? And they would always say no, and you're an inspiration, and it feels so. It's so nice for you to open up, and we'd love to help you, because people don't know what to say. And I used to hate. Maybe hate is a strong word, but I would feel uncomfortable when in the immediate aftermath of a death, when someone would ask, how are you doing today? Or how are you? Obviously, I'm not fine. So I kind of wish people wouldn't ask that.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion?
What is the suggestion?
Yeah, let's give them some developmental feedback. What would you suggest because we know, and this has been spoken about a lot on the podcast, we know that people are doing it because they feel that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But so let's give them some guidance. What can we suggest?
I want them. They can ask, "How are you?" But ask me about my parents. What I didn't like was when people would just pretend like it didn't happen. But people, it's awkward. They don't know what to say. They probably think I don't want to bring them up to make him sad.
Yeah.
But they're always on my mind, especially right after death. So you might as well talk about it, but I understand why no one did it.
Yeah.
I'd probably be the same in there. It was just frustrating to feel like people were pretending that, I was fine, or they don't need to talk about it, or that was tough for sure. So my advice to people in general, if there's someone grieving, is to ask how they are, but ask them about their parents, about are they feeling worse today than yesterday? How's it? Do you need me to do something for you? Okay, maybe that is more
practical
helpful.
help.
Yeah, practical help. Do you want to go out? Do you want to go to the movies? I don't know. Do you need a distraction? Maybe you can just say something as simple as, do you need a distraction? Do you need me to distract you?
Yeah.
Or do you want to just talk about it?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to talk about it a lot, but I wouldn't know how to bring it up because they weren't bringing it up sometimes. So yeah, but
it's so weird because, again, it's one of those things whereby, yes, we all grieve differently, and therefore we all react differently to people's help and people's whatever, and that's one of the big reasons why on the podcast I don't ask people's stories beforehand or get too much detail, because I sound like a stuck record, but it's as if I were to meet you straight off the bat, whatever, and you would just mention, I lost my mum a few years back and it was part of the story. Most people kind of go, and it's literally a flag in their brain. This is how I kind of envisage it. Whatever.
Envision it, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That the flag goes up and they go, right, they've mentioned a dead relative. I'm so sorry about your mum. Coffee, or can I change the subject?
Don't you hate when it ruins the mood?
Just
maybe at work, like, are you going to visit your parents, like this, and you just this is a great point, because I never know how to handle this. I should just prepare a stock answer for this.
Yes,
because I don't know, what do you say? Like, I usually say, my parents passed away, or so. I think there was once, actually, I was with my brother, I'll never forget this, and we were looking for a house to buy in Lebanon or something with a real estate agent, and this guy apparently knew our parents.
Okay.
But not too well, because he asked, how are they?
I was going to say.
How are they? And my brother answered, they're fine, they say hello. And we went outside and just started laughing, and I said, how could you say that? He said, Nadim, I wasn't in the mood to explain to him that both dad and mom had cancer and they both died. Like, I didn't want to do this to us. I wasn't in the mood to explain.
Yeah.
And for his condolences or whatever.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm really friends with your parents or something.
That's so weird.
Like, obviously not.
They say hi.
But the fact that my brother said, they're fine, they say hello. Ever since then, I sometimes wonder if I should do that, but I've never ever done it. I've never. I just say, I always try to immediately say I'm fine. So if someone asks, are you going to visit your parents, this holiday?
Yep.
I say, actually, my parents passed away. And they're like, oh, I say, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm good. I always say that to reassure them.
Oh, so I lead with that. So they will say, oh, are you going to see, are you flying home to see your parents at Christmas? I always say,
don't worry.
No, I always go, this is going to sound really morbid. And I make it quite straight out the bat.
I love that.
I go, oh, this is going to, I said, don't let this bring down the conversation. My parents aren't around anymore. I was like, so no, I'm not going home.
Not to make this awkward.
But I literally put that up straight out the front and make almost a joke out of it.
I love that. That's
or
brilliant.
If it's, because same as you, every story that anyone tells me, I usually have a story about my mum and my dad, right? So then, my friend will be like, oh, there was this time and we ha, and everything's great. And I'll go, oh my God. So I had this time like, oh, don't let this bring the conversation down. My dad's not around anymore, but just before, when he was ill, it was this, or whatever. And I kind of see them, like, their brain working out, going, okay, she's given me permission to laugh with her. Like, everything's fine.
It's all about permission.
And it is, that's it. But so that's what I do. Feel free to take it. I mean, he already said he was stealing it anyway.
Do you ever feel, I don't know what reminded me of this, but do you ever feel guilty for missing one parent more than the other? Because I definitely, maybe it's not the same for you, but I definitely miss my mom more because probably I was closer to her. And she was more recent. Her death was more recent.
Yeah, so mine, I think it was because I'm daddy's little girl and I had an amazing relationship with my mum. Like, we were best friends. But my dad has more anecdotes. And okay, so my parents separated when I was 8 or 9. And although we only lived about 5 miles away from each other, 10 kilometers for the for the metric listeners, is that, and I saw my dad all the time, but so because he was that little bit out of my reach, I aspired, I what's the word? Like really looked up to him so much.
Idolized it.
Idolized. Well done. Such a writer. And so that is why I ride a motorbike. I'm into cars. I like trucks, for God's sake. Like, it's really odd, the things, because my dad did. Because my dad did.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think about my dad. Oh, this is quite.
Are we reaching an
bit of therapy here?
Great.
I definitely think about my dad a lot more than my mum because
the anecdotes,
and then I'll say, oh, my dad. Well, I've said it. How many times have I said it in this podcast? Oh, my dad would say this, or my dad would say that. But my mum was an amazing character, an amazing personality, and she had plenty of anecdotes.
Right.
But I think because I was more best friends with my mum than idolized her.
So my question to you is,
whoa.
do you feel a bit guilty for remembering him more, or not at all?
Oh yes, you're right. I totally avoided your question. No, I don't feel guilty. I do, and this is weird because I'm looking at a photo of my dad behind you, but then they're both over there. I try and even out their photos in my house.
Me too.
And that's really odd. So I have both my mum and dad on the sideboard. But that photograph of my dad is amazing because he looks so cool in like the 80s or whenever it was. And I remember I had that for ages and I was like, but I don't have a picture of another picture of my mum. So now she's on the fridge.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And then I'm like, oh no, but is it bad that my mum's on the fridge, but my dad's in a frame?
Everyone will see when they come in. And
so I genuinely think about that a lot. And then even on the podcast Instagram page, do I post more of my dad than I do of my mum? Like, 100%.
Grief comes with a lot of guilt, I've realized, for me at least.
Really?
Yeah. Just, are you thinking, especially when you lose two, I've struggled a lot over the years with, am I thinking about my dad as much as I think about my mom? Sometimes you forget about both, as harsh as that sounds, because life is distracting you. Yeah. And then I remember like a week later, wow, I haven't thought of them in a while. Like, and then
then you feel guilty for that, don't you?
So grief, guilt, they definitely come together a lot.
Have you had any, and this is something that Aileen from The Lighthouse brought up in episode 13, is that grief, in fact, verbatim, she says grief fundamentally changes you. And I totally agree with that. But do you find that if you've had any death since, or other people have died, and being an expat when you're saying goodbye all the time, you're just like, this is a walk in the park.
So interesting, because the month I moved to Dubai 2 years ago, my grandma passed away. And I was so my grandma, my mom's mom, lived in our building our entire life.
Oh, no way.
So she literally was like a third parent as well. It's
wow, you were really parented, by the way. Mum, dad,
See?
your grandmother, your aunt.
No wonder I moved to Dubai.
Your brother.
Yeah.
Does this is going a bit deep. Does your wife like mother you?
Ooh. Maybe a bit. No.
Join Nadim and I for our other podcast.
I think we should bring her next time, and she'll tell us.
Sorry, so your grandmother lived in your building.
So yeah, and super close, and passed away when I was in Dubai the month I moved here. She was a bit sick, so I knew that it was gonna happen. But it's so weird that death I was terrified of.
Okay.
And I remember, by the way, thinking, oh, no, I really don't want to go through this again. Like, I've had my share of death.
Yeah.
And go to someone else, a dad, mom. No, I don't want to go through my grandma as well, who I was super close to. But actually, I was totally fine with it. Maybe because she was old and it was expected. And it was the first natural death.
Yeah.
She was 95 or 4. So it was the first natural death I'd ever experienced. I have a lot of guilt over my grandma, by the way, that I've cried once since she passed away. My therapist and my wife and everyone tells me it's normal because you knew it was coming and blah blah blah, but I still have this guilt because we were so close.
Okay.
But it's just interesting because after 2 traumatic and unnatural deaths, by the way, they both died at 63, both my dad and my mom.
No way.
That's such a freaky weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Why 63? Probably gonna have a lot of anxiety when I'm 63, but we'll get to that.
You know, the day of before your birthday, your 63rd birthday, you'll be like Phoebe in Friends, where she thinks she's gonna die. No, my psychic died.
Love the Friends references. So death after those 2, like my grandma, was super manageable and super easy.
Yeah.
And also death gives you perspective. Like when I'm having I've written that in one of my articles. Whenever you're having trouble at anything, it could be work or relationship trouble or anything, I remind myself, but you've gone through 2 very traumatic deaths. This shouldn't be a headache. This should be easy. You can get through this. By the way, I also have a lot of hypochondria after losing them.
Really?
Yeah. Now I'm much better, but the 3 years after mom, because in cancer you're used to looking out for every single symptom and definitely means something.
Oh no! Do you Google stuff?
Not Googling,
okay,
but
good.
I would just call my doctor all the time. And what is this? Could this be serious? If I get a cold, I think I might be dying. Like I had a few good 3-4 years where everything would worry me.
Really?
Where if I had a flu and just a fever in bed, I would think of my mom on her deathbed and just panic a bit, you know.
Yeah.
So I suffered a lot actually with that. I haven't in a few years, so that's great.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Good. And was it the same kind of family doctor? So would this person then say, "Okay, Nadim, like..."
She was fantastic.
Okay.
She was actually the palliative care doctor for my mom. So she was amazing, and she also became like a mom, another parenting figure for me.
We got deep dive into this, by the way.
Yeah. So, but yeah, for years afterwards, every single symptom made me panic. I still have some of it, of course, especially with Corona. I mean, last year everyone has it.
Yeah.
But actually, believe it or not, Corona wasn't so bad for me because everyone had the fear of a disease.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
So actually, I felt quite at home.
Did you have Corona?
No,
right.
yeah,
Okay, fine. Yeah.
So yeah, I felt quite at home with that.
Everyone's worried.
Yeah.
Great. This is great news. Yeah, so I was going to say, if as long as she knew, but that's interesting that she was your kind of mum's carer as well.
She was fantastic, and both my brother and I kept going to her. She became our GP. She was amazing. Like, she's one of the reasons when I moved to Lebanon, to Dubai, I didn't want to leave because I relied on her so much, and she was fantastic.
How funny.
Yeah. She helped a lot with my mom. So my mom, in the last month, basically her surgeon did a last-ditch surgery that failed.
Okay.
So he said she has like a month to live. It's super sad to have a ticking clock, by the way.
Yeah.
So they asked us, do you want to stay? Does she want to stay at home or at the hospital or go home? So our palliative care doctor, that's when we got introduced to her. She spoke to mom and realized that mom really wanted to pass away at home. That was her wish. So that's what we did. And she made it easy for us, getting the bed, getting the nurses, all of that. It was super sad to have a mom at home, of course, like dying. And there was the mourning and all of that, like really sad stuff. But that's what she wanted, to pass away at home. Yeah. And you have to honor that wish. Which brings me into, I really felt such relief when I moved out of that house.
Okay, I was going to say, because what about the house?
This was the house that both my parents lived in and we grew up in. And her room became a gym room. We made it after that for like a few years. Yeah. But still, I told my brother is totally fine with the house. It doesn't bother him. I think it does a bit, but he just doesn't admit it.
I think he needs therapy.
Yeah, he does. But everyone does. But when I moved out of the house, it was so good for my mental health, just because you associate it with, especially that she passed away, for example, in that room.
In the house, yeah.
My dad passed away in the hospital. So your grief is also linked to objects and places. Like the car that I used to drive my mom to chemo in, when I sold it a year later, I felt so much better.
Really?
I wish I sold it a month later.
Yeah, how interesting.
It was bringing me down every day. I'd drive back home from work, and there were a lot of crying fits in the car because this car reminded me of chemo days. We spent so much time driving her back and forth to chemo and helping her get into the seat and out of the seat and all of that.
Yeah.
And this is actually in one of my articles. I said, like, get rid of your triggers.
Yes.
The car was a trigger for me.
Yeah. And there's differences between kind of cleansing those triggers without, we're not saying, and again, we're not professionals.
Throw away all the pictures.
Yes, we're not saying throw away the memories or anything, but certainly,
some things have a very negative trigger that your health will improve with if you get rid of. That's for sure. Sometimes you need a certain song to remind you to let it all out, and you start crying and all of that, and pictures. But if you identify something that you would be better off without, get rid of it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's that's a difficult. Here's a piece of advice. Sometimes that's a difficult thing for you to notice.
Right.
So it may take, be it a family member or an extremely close friend, to say, have you ever thought about selling the house?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. I mean, obviously when my dad passed away, we were here. My brother and I both live in the UAE, and my stepmom was at home in the house that my dad passed away in. And of course, when it came to selling the house, of course it was sad. It was our family home where we grew up and what have you. But of course she doesn't want to live there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
100%.
So yeah, it's interesting to be able to recognize those.
What grief is attached to. It's fascinating. And the more you learn about yourself and what triggers you and how you can control your grief. You can't really control it. As you said, it just comes in waves. But maybe recognize and be aware of what's happening. There's one quote, and I hate cheesy quotes, but one stuck with me because it was in a Marvel show I watched a few months ago, and it is, what is grief if not love persevering? I wrote about that in
yes,
one of my
in One Division you said it.
One Division. Have you watched it?
No, it's a strange concept to me. Yeah,
it's very strange, but this quote is life-changing to me because all my life I've looked at grief as something sad and to avoid. But what if it's just a symbol of how your love survives time? It's been almost 10 years since my mom. Suddenly I find this quote so powerful, like I just want to hang it all over
everywhere.
The house, you know?
And
by the way, the quote went viral. Everyone online and on Twitter and stuff, everyone were talking about, mental health people were talking about how powerful it is. So it wasn't just me, but it spoke to me so much. Maybe we should all change our perspective that grief is love carrying on. Yeah. Right? Like that's crazy to me because to me it's the G word. It's like something that I need to avoid.
Really negative.
Oh no, this is grief. Oh no, this is sadness. What if it's not? What if it's something very beautiful and positive?
Yeah.
Right?
I want to see it hanging in your house.
Yeah.
It's better than live, laugh, love, isn't it?
Eat, pray, love, and all those. And money can't buy happiness. All those cheesy stuff. This was beautiful. Yeah.
Money can buy happiness.
Yes.
That's my parting thought. Nadim, I'm conscious of your time. Clearly, we could talk for ages about this, and I know that you will continue to write all about it. But thank you so much for sharing your story and just being so open about it.
Thank you for having me. It was
amazing.
I love meeting fellow dead parent
Yeah.
buddies.
You can be, well, the podcast was going to be called the Dead Parents Society.
Really?
Yeah.
But I love the grief relief.
Yeah.
As a copywriter, like, I love it. It's a brilliant name.
Okay, well then credit to my best friend Giselle.
Bravo, Giselle.
We went to well, she'll love how you pronounce her name as well because her dad's Armenian Lebanese.
Ah, okay.
So anyway, we went to the golf club up here at Arabian Ranches, and we had full English breakfast to really hash out quite what I was going to call it, because the Dead Parent Society is a great name, but there was, I think, 4 or 5 other podcasts called the same.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. I was like, I thought I was being really funny. Well, actually, my brother. Anyway, yeah, we thrashed it out, and yeah.
No one has that grief relief, right?
No, and it's also, it was very important to me that it was that grief relief podcast,
Right,
because so that you'd be like, have you listened to that grief relief podcast?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes. So
Plus
yeah.
it rhymes, which is always good.
Oh yes, and well,
love a good rhyme.
rhyming. Yes, I'm a big fan of alliteration too.
Yeah.
Right, let's not talk about writing, but yeah, shout out to Giselle, love you. Before I let you go, I always ask my guests for a podcast or an Instagram recommendation. Did I ask you for that?
You didn't, but a
Damn it,
podcast
what's
or
wrong with me?
Instagram recommendation. Can I say a book, which is Untethered Soul?
Absolutely.
Which is absolutely
yeah,
life-changing.
you mentioned it. Yeah, who's it by?
Michael something Singer.
Okay.
And it is the most incredible thing I've ever read. So you can definitely get it as an audiobook. So it's kind of like a podcast. So I'm
Okay.
cheating the system.
No, yeah.
Life-changing book that teaches you how to, just constantly be aware and to control your emotions and your mind, and just be aware of your mental health.
Yeah.
And it's just life-changing. I keep it by my bed, and I
Really?
read passages all the time, which I've never done in my life. So I can't recommend this book enough. Yeah.
Untethered Soul.
Yeah,
I'll make sure I
amazing.
put all the links below and everything. And like I always say, Nadim and I, we're not experts, we're not professionals.
Yeah.
If you've been affected by anything we've spoken about, like, please reach out. We can connect you to the right people if necessary. I'm going to put Nadim's LinkedIn, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
Link below, because or your blog or whatever is
Yeah.
easiest, because the articles he writes are truly amazing. And yeah, feel free to reach out, and at the same time, review, share it, let other people know. And I genuinely mean that, because sometimes I think I shouldn't talk about reviewing and giving us 5 stars and subscribing, because it kind of pales into insignificance compared to the subject. But genuinely, if more people hear about this podcast and it helps people, then
It does a lot of good, honestly.
Then
And
happy
people
days.
need this. So many people live with their grief in silence.
Yeah.
Without talking about it. It helps so much. It's so therapeutic.
Yeah. So review and give 5 stars, for goodness sake.
That's right.
Nadim, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're
It
off
was
to
great.
pick up your puppy.
Of course,
From
yes.
the vets. Everything's fine.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's
Just
fine.
getting neutered. Yeah.
Oh, bless him. Oh
Yeah.
God, he's not going to like you very
Yeah,
much at
for a
all.
while. It's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I'll
you
speak to
so
you soon.
much. Thank
See
you.
ya.
Bye.